Good evening. You're watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with David Frank. We are talking national political news of the day. And of course, I think the biggest quote unquote emergency generated by political ridiculousness is the debt ceiling, which we are expected to hit our debt limit tomorrow at midnight. That is Thursday night. We've been here before. It's a tired story. We get to the debt limit. We have to raise our debt limit. It has to be done by the Senate. I'm going to let Dave explain this thing because I've never really completely understood it. But it has been something that has happened since the 1990s, that when there's a Democrat in the White House, the Republicans use it basically to hold the country hostage in order to get some concessions in terms of spending cuts or something else, and the threat is to close the government. At one point, Newt Gingrich made the threat, and Clinton called the bluff, and the government was closed. I believe that happened once under Obama. It happened once on West Wing. It's a big dramatic thing. It is a big deal because it could mean hundreds of thousands of federal employees don't get paid, and there may not be immediate impacts on things like national security and basic government services, but after a while it takes a toll. National parks get closed, so tourists have to change their plans, and then a lot of things don't happen, such as environmental and other types of enforcement. Of course, we always keep the military going. They have plenty of money. And the like. They always make sure that happens. But we're here again. Republicans have power, and with all the concessions given to the crazies, it looks like they are set to once again threaten to not up the debt limit. And this is not for money that hasn't been spent yet. This is for money that has already been spent. And for us to be able to pay off. Biden isn't even negotiating. I don't know. Maybe something happened today that broke out, but it wasn't, as of at least yesterday, negotiating with the Republicans on this. Says, you know what, they can do what they want. I don't negotiate with terrorists or whatever the rhetoric is being used. So, Dave, maybe you can explain a little bit more precisely what's happening. Again, we've talked about it on this show, and where we're likely to go with this.
Yeah, I think big picture, the most important thing to recognize is that it's like a self-imposed cap, and that there's from time to time people are saying that, hey, the government, if you operated it like a household and you had a credit card and the credit card had a limit, you just can't spend more than that. But the truth is that that's not how the federal government works, and in particular, the United States federal government. Our currency is managed by the Federal Reserve, basically, which is a private collection of banks, and they can create money out of thin air that they could lend to us for infinity. And more so, other countries, other banks, we are the lender of last resort. When I say we, I mean the Federal Reserve on behalf of the U.S. government is the lender of last resort, as we saw with the financial crisis of 2008, where they made up $28 trillion out of thin air to lend out. They put about $8 trillion between the financial crisis of 2008 and the COVID crisis we just recently had out of thin air, added to the actual U.S. government balance sheet. So there's really no technical limit on money. This is just a way that Republicans and Democrats have chosen to kind of manifest a fight over fiscal responsibility, and it's a moving target that's been increased. I think I saw the number that basically more than one time a year for the entireties of its existence, it's been moved. So it's a moving target. In this case, it's now currently at $31.4 trillion. And like you said in your intro, we're going to be reaching that number relatively soon in overall aggregate debt on the books for the U.S. government. But the truth is that it's not actually, there's not a direct connection between the U.S. government's commitment to spend money when it allocates money through the budget process, and it says, the money is going to be spent these ways. That means that the full faith and credit of the U.S., once we commit to something, we're obligated to pay it. So it's a debt obligation. There's no connection between our debt obligations and this debt limit. This is really what's the word? It's a gimmick. In effect, it's a negotiating gimmick, and it's unfortunate that we have it. I think it's important to point out historically that Hamilton himself.
And let's just be real clear on this.
Sure.
We're the only country in the world that has this, right?
I did hear one other country, I think like Denmark or somebody also has a self-imposed, and there might have been a third country that had it that got rid of it because they realized how unworkable it is. It's just, it doesn't help. The goal, ideally, like giving fiscal conservatives the benefit of the doubt here, the idea of having a tangible ceiling on the amount of money you could borrow, that's for negotiating purposes. It's a reference point. So you could imagine that the reason that 3 countries on Earth decided to use it was for that purpose. But one of 3 said it's not workable. And truthfully, in our country, I don't think it's workable either. That's what I was going to say about Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 3. He makes the case that any country that is serious with a serious and effective government, I'm paraphrasing, must pay their bills. Because no banks are going to lend to a country that needs to pay for its army to defend itself if the country borrowing the money does not pay the bills on time. He goes on to say, if you do that, then it's going to cost you more. Lenders are going to start raising interest rates on you, and like usury. He used the term usury. He said you're going to be looked at like a bank, like someone who's bankrupt. And so basically, I know the world has changed quite a bit in the last 240 whatever years since he wrote this, but that's the background basically. And I think I'll let you pick this up, but I just want to say, like, in terms of what the issue, we'll talk about solutions, but the political issue is that McCarthy, the reason it's like coming to a really train wreck scenario right now is because Speaker McCarthy, in order to become Speaker, did make some promises to get those last few votes that he needed. He pledged that they would not lift the debt ceiling unless Congress slashes $130 billion in spending at least next year. And also some of the other people on his side have asked him to commit to a balanced budget in a finite amount of time. And for their part, the White House, like you said, the White House is like, we're not negotiating. But the truth is the White House did send over negotiators, and it's currently in play right now because it is such a serious issue.
And let's bear in mind, there was a time from 2016 to 2018 that the Republicans had total power. That is, they had the House, the Senate, and they had the presidency. They did not cut spending during that time. They increased it dramatically because they wanted their economy. They wanted their low unemployment. And the rest. There was a deflated economy. They wanted inflation at that time to pick up because it had been so low. They do not do this when a Republican is in the White House. Just like they had passed a bill to overturn Obamacare like 50 or 60 times up until then. Then when they had the opportunity to do it, they didn't do it. And we can go into why and the rest, but because they don't do this when a Republican is president. I want to talk a little bit about the thing about the solutions, because you have a lot of conservative economists who've argued over the years that raising taxes doesn't help with the deficit, because if you raise taxes on people, on productive capitalists, it means they have less money to invest, and therefore they don't stimulate the economy to generate the types of revenue generating transactions that are there. It is myopic economics. The Laffer curve, they refer it to, has never worked. That's why supply side economics failed, and Reagan in 1981 had to resort to a form of Keynesianism, liberal politics, in order to pull us out of the double dip recession he caused. Because in fact, there's nothing magical about a dollar being spent by in the private sector as opposed to public sector. Public sector money can be just as stimulative, and but however, the cutting spending is not necessarily conducive to reducing the deficit. It may be, but you've got to do it right. You cannot cut spending in such a way that you cause an economic contraction. You cannot cut spending in a way that's going to cost jobs and lead to less money in the economy and significantly fewer revenue generating transactions. You can actually aggravate a deficit by cutting spending. If you want to cut spending and affect the deficit, you need to cut capital intensive spending, the military budget, but they're not going to touch that, right? I mean, it's so yes, there are solutions to it, but they want to cut spending that is labor intensive, where money actually goes to consumers where they can spend money. Now, right now, maybe that's not a bad thing in light of inflation, right? If they want to do that, but not billing this as a way to deal with inflation. They're billing their spending cuts as a way with Mickey Mouse math to basically lower the deficit. But it doesn't work. It hasn't worked in history. Reagan's made cuts to social spending. It didn't lower the deficit. In his first term, his deficit exceeded all of the deficits of combined going back to George Washington. So, it's just the spending cuts can affect a deficit, but they've got to be planned, but economically very, in line with monetarist policies. It's much more complicated than you think, and you can't go in with a sledgehammer with these idiots in the Freedom Caucus and actually have something done. But they don't care if it has a positive or negative effect on the economy right now. They want to get some idiot elected president. That's their goal. Is sabotage, as it was for 6 years under Obama.
So I want to add to a couple of things that you've said and maybe tweak the verbiage a little bit. But I think your point's well taken that this is a complicated issue that ought to be dealt with precision. And instead, the working group who are the folks behind the Freedom Caucus ultimately in parallel. That Venn diagram is not 100%, but they overlap quite a bit. As we saw, they put forward their leader as a potential replacement for McCarthy during the decision to choose McCarthy as the speaker. So we know that this guy's he's being held in high regard. And Representative Norman said, look, I just want a 10-year balanced budget. That's my goal. I'm holding out for that. And he was literally pointing to this Republican working group document, and it's all available online. You can see their charts. But when I actually dug into the numbers and I looked at it, in effect, if you decide that you're not going to lower defense spending, and you only want to lower discretionary spending, but you want to cut out 40 cents of every dollar, that is austerity to the highest order. That would cause a massive dislocation. I don't think it could ever happen, but at least I think they're throwing this out there as the the Platonic ideal, the holy grail of what they're looking for is a conversation to happen around the fact that we borrow about 40 cents of every dollar we spend, give or take. But like you said, when Trump administration decided, they were going to cut taxes on, in effect, they said everybody got a tax cut. In reality, we know the vast majority of that tax cut was in the top, I think 10, between 1% got the most. And then as it got anybody below the top, 10% got minimal. So it was a high.
And most of ours have expired.
Yeah.
Or will by 2025. Yeah. So
just rough math, if it's $1 trillion cut and it's over 10 years, so they're adding about $200 billion a year, just for that one decision, because a tax cut to them is also a higher order principle, like a balanced budget, without a whole lot of precision. But I think it's worth mentioning. I know this is a complicated subject, and it's lame to get into the weeds. People's heads start to spin. But I want to say that, number one, I think the Democrats are defending on principle a conversation that would better occur during the time when they're actually doing the budget. So when the budget negotiations are going on, that's when this type of conversation is supposed to happen. And that's why I think Democratic leadership is basically saying we're not going to deal with this now. So what does that mean? If they decide not to negotiate at all or make any drastic cuts on principle, it just means that the Treasury Department has to go through all sorts of what they're calling extraordinary measures. We could get into the weeds, but I don't think we need to. There's a lot of things that they can do to shuffle money around, because the debt ceiling is defined as a certain category of debt. And there are all sorts of things you can do to change that number. So one of them is so far out there. I've tried to explain it to a bunch of people, and they just said, don't bother explaining that on the radio. You'll just lose people. So, but in addition to things like shuffling money around or not issuing new debt of a certain type, and instead issuing, finding ways to just make the number 31.4 trillion go down as you borrow more and more money, you can make that number go down because you are replacing the amount of outstanding debt by calling it something different. So there's all sorts of ways that can happen, and that probably will happen for a while before the government shuts down.
We'll find out. We'll be talking about this next week, probably one way or another, unless it all fizzles out tomorrow. But somehow I don't think it's going to fizzle out tomorrow.
These are not new expenses. It's paying bills that have already been incurred.
Why wouldn't we sit down now, set a budget, set a path to get us to a balanced budget, and let's start paying this debt off and make sure the future generation has as many opportunities as we do?
It is something that should be done without conditions. We should not be negotiating around it.
The extraordinary measures are things like not investing government employee contributions into the retirement funds, things where you can catch up later and make everyone whole.
I didn't dedicate a topic to it last week because I kind of thought this thing would die down a little bit. But then, after some initial classified documents were found at one location in Biden's old office, it turns out that his attorneys found documents in 3 other locations. And now the media is running away with it. And the mantra is, no, it's not exactly the same as Donald Trump's. He's cooperating. He's not thwarting subpoenas, but there is still hypocrisy, and to a certain extent there is, given Biden's statements on the matter about how irresponsible it is to have classified documents. I've been looking for information on whether or not we know what the nature of these classified documents are. It sounds like these were documents that were picked up by staffers when he left and put into boxes, and he didn't know that they were in his garage. Apparently one of them were in his garage. And then he made a mistake of making a big deal about the fact that it's in with his Corvette. And he likes to make sure his Corvette is safe, but he had an ad way back when, and where he's backing his Corvette in the garage, and everybody's like now looking at that ad and wondering what box are the classified documents in. It's become kind of a joke in a way, but it's also brought about some legitimate questions of discussion as to maybe we ought to establish some firm protocols about how presidents and vice presidents and anyone else who has access to classified documents handles them at the end of a administration's term. But the Republicans want to investigate this. They're claiming somehow it's worse than what Trump did. They don't explain how, but they want to have a committee to investigate this, and they're screaming about the double standards. Of course, they're not talking about any kind of committee to investigate the 30,000 or whatever documents that Trump had, that and some of which he may still have, and is fighting to get them back. But Biden put himself in this situation. I think there's some political negligence here in the fact that, there's a little bit of a controversy in that the documents were discovered a few days before the election, and they're being faulted by some in the media for not doing a Comey type thing and announcing it in an election that he's not even a candidate in, right? It's just, to me, that's stupid. I think that it was perfectly justified in not revealing it to the public during that time. But they probably shouldn't have announced it at all, made it available to the public until they had done a full search, so that we don't have this dribble. Oh, we found some more. Oh, here, we found some more. They should have done a full search everywhere, had them all, and said, we found these documents in these places, and we have turned them over to the archives and to the Department of Justice. A lot of debate about whether Merrick Garland, in assigning a Trumper, basically, to be the independent counsel. I actually don't think it's fair to call him a Trumper. He's a right winger, but I don't think he's in that. And I don't think Merrick Garland would have chosen him if he was somebody who didn't want his reputation to remain intact as somebody who is professional and neutral. And I actually suspect that it's an act of political genius on the part of Merrick Garland, because basically he hands it over to this guy. This guy says, yeah, it looks like it was some staffers who put it into a box, sloppy, but shame on you, Biden, for being sloppy, and then it's over. Right. And here he is. He's given it not to a Bush era person even, but a Trumper, quote unquote. And Merrick Garland looks like he did, the right thing. So, I actually think that's probably, but Garland's coming under criticism. He gave almost the exact same explanation as to why he was turning it over to Trump. Some people are saying neither of them should have been turned over to special counsel, that, he should do his own damn job and investigate both of them. But I don't know. Having turned it over to Trump, I think he was obligated to turn this one over to a special counsel. I think this investigation is going to be a lot quicker than the other one. I think the other one could possibly result in criminal charges. I don't think there's any way this one will. And I think that's the genius of it. He says, well, hey, this is a recommendation coming from a Trumper. What can I say? So anyway, I'm going to let you jump in here.
Yeah. So thank you for the intro here. And I think that, there's a lot of hyperbole in the political discourse on all sorts of things. And our next topic will be the same way. But this is one of those ones that rises to a pretty high level of that actually in media currently. So much so that I think, like you said, it may have been really wise for Attorney General Merrick Garland to appoint a special counsel, Robert Hur, former U.S. attorney appointed by Trump when he was president, because that way it just sort of insulates his department from the media storm and the accusations of favoritism in any way. But just getting back to what's the meat of the story here, meat and potatoes. It's about 20 documents total, apparently, so far. And one source had said that they know there's a classified document in the mix. Another source said there's 6 pages that are top secret in the mix. So it's, to a certain extent, it could be the same document, depending on your source. But they're not letting a whole lot out. But I think, like you said, the political so what happened here? In effect, it sounds like, in part anyway, that when the vice president's office was getting packed up, they were emptying things out, putting them in boxes, sending them to his primary residence, sending them to his beach house residence, sending them to his office, his new office, and that's how this happened. Is that it was literally just some people not really tasked with understanding what they're doing as much. I mean, maybe that's giving them the benefit of the doubt too much, but it really does sound like office packing 101. They just sent him out, and so then the question is, once they were discovered by staff, how did they handle it? And the claim from Biden's team is that, look, we've been transparent about all of this, and now it's complete, and now the chips are just going to fall where they fall. Like I'm again oversimplifying, but there's been messages from lawyers that effectively say the same thing. I'd like to address, if you don't mind, the criminality piece real quick, and then hear your response to it. Yeah. So the claim is, it's people. There's some false equivalence going on out there about, this was similar in some way to the Trump document situation, but it's really completely different in almost every respect. Because with Trump there was a refusal to return documents and even potential of obstruction of justice. So that's what got that whole thing going in the direction that it did for the former president. But with respect to the former vice president, now current president,
right. And let me just add to that. A lot of the Republicans are saying, well, why didn't the FBI raid Biden's residence? Well, why do you think? Because was it necessary?
Yes, absolutely unnecessary. Because this is his staffers came forward and said, hey, by the way, we found this and we're going to do what we need to do. And they said, okay. So that's why they didn't get raided, because of that. But so the statute though that we're talking about that it applies in both situations. It really is the Espionage Act. And so there's different sections of it. We don't have to get super in the weeds. I know I've said that about 5 times already today and apologize for the cliche, but it's true that, really the threshold is gross negligence. Was there some gross negligence? And in the event that there's not gross negligence, then a way to also get in trouble is if you don't report promptly. But so as long as you report promptly, then you sort of get a little bit of leeway here in the Espionage Act. And so the claim is, the defense is, yes, we reported promptly. Yes, we've been fully transparent. And a U.S. attorney was assigned from the moment that the disclosures came forward. And so Biden's attorney, and I'm not quoting here, but in effect, he said, it's unlikely this will ever be prosecuted, even if the Justice Department did prosecute incumbent presidents, which it doesn't.
Right.
So that's kind of the takeaway here.
And even if a new president comes in, I don't think that Department of Justice will prosecute. It's just not going to happen. That would be stupid. That would be patently stupid. It's a totally different situation. I mean, I heard one Republican say, do you believe that somebody didn't know what's in your garage? I know what's in my garage. Do you know what's in your garage? And I don't. I've got a couple of boxes in there that are from 3 moves ago. I discover stuff all the time that I forgot was in my garage. That it's just, but I'm a slob. What can I say? But it's just, and I pack everything myself. I mean, other than my wife and kids maybe, but I don't have staff packing stuff for me. But this is what they're trying to say. Well, it was there for 6 years, so obviously he must have known about it. And that, to me, no, obviously he did not know about it if it was there for 6 years. Duh. I mean, it's just the common sense goes out the window there. What would he have been doing with it for 6 years if he knew it was there? Why would he need it? Why would he have needed it for the 4 years he was out there? It's not like he was showing it off to his golf buddies. I'm sorry. It's just not. And they don't even want to admit that they're looking for equivalence, because they're trying to make it look like it's worse somehow. And they don't have it. This is a spectacle. Biden opened himself up to it by not effectively managing it. It shouldn't have happened. Makes me wonder if this has happened before, in other places. It just, but the staff needs to be trained. Anybody who is hired to remove things from any office in the White House or in any offices that are associated that has classified documents need to be trained to recognize it. They need to have security clearance to do that. and to be trained on it, and nothing should leave until that's been checked. That's what should happen. Another question is what are these documents? Because I actually think Trump raised a pretty good question, or at least some of the people advocating for him. Why are some of these documents classified? Maybe the government overdoes what ought to be classified, and that's also a legitimate question, because we don't know what these documents are. Are they really matters of national security, or does government just like to make itself more important by making things secret that really ought to be secret? Like for instance, for the longest time, they didn't disclose the fact that the American government had broken the codes to bust that busted Alger Hiss. Well, it's like it said, well, we didn't want to reveal that in the trial against Alger Hiss because we didn't want the Soviets to know that. Well, that made sense in 1944 or whatever, but the Soviets obviously knew they'd broken their codes. They changed their codes in 1946. So to use that as a justification in 1978, when the family was trying to get the information, obviously that was bogus, right? So we need to, it should have been unclassified a long time before that, and it should not have been used as a reason to resist. And I'm not going to go into that whole story, but that's, there are a lot of questions about how fair that trial was and whether he was innocent or guilty. And that's a complicated question, and I'm not even going into who he was for those people who don't know. Look up Alger Hiss. But somebody was accused of espionage who had been in the Roosevelt administration. But anyway, it's just this is where politics is at. He does this thing, and the media runs all over it. I mean, the right wingers always talk about how left biased the media is, and yet the left media is making a bigger deal of this than the right media. CNN covered this more than Fox did in the first few days. They just love this stuff, right? I mean, it's not because they've got a political bias, but because it's more fun than actual policy and the rest to discuss. I mean, they get to show the Corvette thing going over and over again, and then Biden gets out and makes kind of statements that were inadvisable, and then every time there's a new finding, new revelations. I mean, it's just it's kind of silly, but Biden and his people were sloppy here. Not just in terms of the documents, but how they handled this thing, and I haven't seen any improvement on how they're handling it. I mean, other than Merrick Garland turning it over to probably, and my parents disagree with me on this. They think it was an act of cowardice on the part of Merrick Garland to hand this over and to turn it into a spectacle. I don't think this guy is going to turn it into a spectacle. I'm forgetting his name, Asian guy, but I think.
Talk about special counsel. His name is Robert Hur.
Robert Hur, thank you. I actually think it was genius. I think he's going to have a report probably in a relatively short amount of time that's going to say, sloppy, shame on you, President Biden, no criminal liability. I could be wrong, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, you'd originally, when we first teed up this idea of talking about this today, you said scandal or headache. And I think my first note was for my conclusion. I went to the conclusion first, and it was mostly just an embarrassing headache. Yeah, I know we've reached the limited time we have here, but there are folks out there who are saying maybe it's a way for the staffers to maybe not his own personal staffers, but folks within the party to knock him down a peg to maybe clear some room for someone else to run for president. But I don't think that there's any evidence to that at all.
The world of tomorrow is cooking with gas. Right, Jinx Falkenberg?
Naturally, just as nearly all of America's fine restaurants do, 99% of the restaurants at the New York World's Fair use gas for cooking. Whether you're dining here at the top of the fair, eating a marvelous Italian dinner, a delicious smorgasbord, an exotic Indian curry, great French cuisine, Or delicious regional dishes here at Festival 65, the American restaurant in the gas pavilion. All the cooking is by gas. Why not have in your own kitchen the same fast, cool, clean, controlled gas cooking that fine chefs insist on? Live modern for less with gas.
Well, last topic. Gas lighting over gas stoves. It's a real interesting topic that happened that came out because some idiot Democrat on the what is the commission, the
Consumer
US
Product Safety
was talking to the media and said at some point, due to health and environmental risks, we may have to ban gas stoves, and that has set off a furor of politics that reminds me of when people right wingers were complaining that we're going to take away their incandescent light bulbs and replace them with squiggly light bulbs, and the war on Christmas and the war on everything. I mean, it gives them excuse to scream, and somebody in Texas, Ronnie Jackson. I thought this was parody. I swore it. I'll never give up my gas stove, never in caps. If the maniacs in the White House come for my stove, they can pry it from my cold dead hands. Come and take it in caps with 2 exclamation points. Pry it from my cold dead hands. I swear I thought that was just supposed to be a joke, but apparently he's dead serious, and Trump and everybody are really that this is again Democrats trying to control your life and blah blah blah, and then pictures of Ocasio-Cortez and Jill Biden using gas stoves came out. Oh, the hypocrisy, and screaming about this and anyway, this is it's become ridiculous. I mean, I like cooking on gas stoves, but if it's determined to be an environmental, well, I have electric now anyway. I don't really like it. I like being able to turn the heat down when it goes down and not have it slowly go down. I like to, not have to worry about, my food burning while I'm waiting for it to go down, and so that I can be working on something else. Electric stuff doesn't really work for a wok if you're trying to cook Cantonese recipes. I like it. I like stoves, but I can also get, something to have outside and work with it. In fact, I've got one now, so it's rather than replacing it with a gas stove, but it's just where is the maturity level of this country in terms of the politics? It's not going to be banned. I don't. Everybody is saying that the federal government doesn't have the ability to ban it. Really, there's ways that they can make it difficult to buy it, but an outright ban, states could ban it if they wanted to. They can make it. Difficult or impossible to install in houses. I think that might even be in motion in California. I'm not sure, but it's just not, all this stuff. I wish I had the time and energy to worry about something like this. Dave.
Yeah, cool. So thank you again for framing it the way you have. It gives an insight into what it really is that it's an opportunity for a reactionary disgust to governmental overreach. So like you've heard Trump say before that he was really upset with the low volume flushing toilets. They don't even flush, right? So that's a mandate based on water conservation.
And now we know what he wanted to flush.
Yeah, documents. Surprise, surprise. Comes full circle. But so, just getting back to what is the heart of the matter is that the reason that this even came up as an issue at all, it was a Bloomberg interview. Like you said, Richard Trumka, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commissioner, and he just pointed out that, research shows, and not just one study, but there's been a bunch of studies that there's a connection between childhood asthma and living in a house with a gas stove. Approximately 1 in 8 kids with childhood asthma, they estimate, comes from living in a house with gas stove. But what the White House quickly came out with, and the actual, they said, look, the president does not support a ban, and the commission is independent, is not banning gas stoves. I heard other people say, really what they're talking about is trying to prevent people from putting them in new construction, new buildings, which is already happening. San Francisco, New York City, and Berkeley, I think if I remember correctly, those were Berkeley, San Francisco, and New York City. They already have banned gas stoves in new buildings. So it's something that's underway for a reason. And it's not just childhood asthma. There's lots of connections that people have known for a very long time, that indoor air pollution leads to there's leaks of nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, and benzene, and the types of illnesses are varied. But the idea is that if you don't have proper ventilation, you really are making people sick. So that's the science behind it, not just cardiovascular and cognitive issues too. So it's not the links are there. But then the question is all the political hype, and so. Yeah, I'm with you. I actually prefer cooking on a gas stove because that's kind of how I was raised and that's what I'm comfortable with. Working in the restaurant business in the past, that's what apparently most people do in the workplace there. But what about New York City, Berkeley, and San Francisco? What are restaurants doing, new restaurants? Well, it turns out that there's a big new push for induction cooking. So induction cooking, it's not like our electric surface that we usually say gas or electric. There's this new third choice, not air quotes in new, but induction. Really, it's creating a magnetic field that excites the metal in the pan, creates the heat in the pan only, no heat on the cooktop, no heat escaping. So it's actually much healthier for the restaurant industry. And so there are restaurant industry folks that are promoting this. In fact, it's some estimates are that it's twice as efficient. So I saw a chef that was saying that you could cook twice as much meat with the same amount of energy, and it makes cleanup easier because you're not have burnt stuff on your stovetop because there's no heat on the stovetop. So anyway, from just a purely rational, pragmatic conversation, you could argue that it should be a consumer choice and that we could, in fact, or maybe should transition if people can afford it. The cost might come down, etc. But this response, the media uproar, the publicity stunts, the political outrage, again, I think it's really mostly about a pushback against government overreach, purely political theater.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it'll win. They'll win some points with it. It's meat for their own people. It's not going to impress people who want inflation and other problems to be addressed. This is not a play for the center. Definitely, it's a play for for people who are into identity politics, their cultural identity, and if they weren't identifying with their gas stoves before, they are now. I imagine a lot of people, if they are Trump leaning Republicans and they have electric stoves, they're feeling shamed right now and will probably go to replace them. Who knows? It just but it just boggles the mind and how little it took for this to blow into something ridiculous. It just took one comment from one guy who didn't even understand the law and the process, probably shouldn't be on that commission, and all of a sudden, it's turned into they're coming for your gas stoves. Well, as you pointed out, they are in certain jurisdictions, and that's democracy. That's how it works. It's going to be harder to get one. There are alternatives. You can, and if there are these health risks, better to do it outside. There's plenty of gas things available for cooking outside. As I said, I got a big one for my walk, so I can do things. It actually works better than a gas stove on the inside. You can, for Cantonese cooking, you want to make things real hot for real quick cooking that you don't overcook. It's great, and it's also perfect for cooking pho. So anyway, it's just but nobody wants to hear that. They want to be able to scream and yell, and they want to have something to argue about. And it's anyway, it's sad that it's that way. I don't know that if it hasn't always been that way, but it just seems to be easily triggered right now because of the media format. Things can spread real quickly and misinformation can go around. I mean, there are stories about, somebody who lost an election somewhere because he was called a thespian back in the 1940s or something like that, and things like that. Dumb things have happened in the past, but it does seem to be at a pitch right now because it's mainstream leaders. It's not a small town, type of thing where it just happens. This is, people, they don't have to research it because their constituents aren't going to hold them accountable for not doing it.
It's just one more thing that sort of is triggering folks to be resistant to the regulatory, again, burden. But in this case, it's 40 million households. So it's, it's about a little less than a quarter of all households.
Right.
Already have it.
But even where they are instituting these bans, it's mostly pertaining to new construction. It's not right. People I don't think are being ordered to remove the gas stoves that are already in their houses. It's for new construction. So it's just it's you can buy an old house if you still want to have a gas stove.
So one thing we didn't say, when we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention it, is that there's this ad campaign that's decades old, cooking with the gas, that it was a sign of luxury and that you're cooking with gas. The fossil fuel industry has spent over the years many, many tens of millions of dollars persuading people that there's a luxury lifestyle to be able to cook with gas. And even just in the last 4 years, Mother Jones report that trade groups have hired at least 100 different influencers to go online in their social media accounts and really hype up that gas cooking is better. So it's right. It's not something that really makes a mark in your day to day. You don't realize that there are people doing it, almost like product placement in films. No, I don't think anybody realized when they were younger that they saw Coke and Pepsi in every movie or cigarettes or anything else that was product placement by design, unless someone actually was really observant about it, or once it's brought to light, then you realize it. But the fossil fuel money gives not just millions or tens or we're talking many hundreds of millions of dollars. And if 40 million people got a tax credit to upgrade to a non-gas stove, for example, and it wasn't mandated, but it was incentivized, that would hit them very hard, squarely. And while natural gas right now is, massively involved in a geostrategic problem with supplying energy to Europe during the winter this year because of the Russian sort of disconnection of the economies, they're always looking to grow markets, and so they're not worried about whether the gas could be used somewhere else instead of here. They want all users on board.
Yeah. I also noticed in my reading that the oil and gas companies came out in opposition or in negative response to this report of what this committee member said, and I think that was a mistake. They should just let their surrogates argue. When they come out speaking on behalf of it, that makes them look really bad. They should just let the politicians and the right-wing social media people argue this on their behalf, because it's actually a really bad look when they're coming out and saying, no, it's not. I mean, it makes them look like the tobacco companies and the rest in their denial of the health risk. All they're doing when they're denying that there are any health risks is they're underscoring the debate. That was a big mistake on their part, a huge miscalculation. I think, because in fact, this whole discussion now underscores that there is now going to be a discussion about whether it's a health risk. I wouldn't have even heard about this. I mean, I've known about it the whole time, but how many people would have even heard about this that weren't aware of gas stoves as being a health risk? And not to mention, to the a lot of other benefits as well in terms of the usage of the gas and the rest. Not to mention fire risks during earthquakes. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons not to use gas. But I don't know. I like my on-demand water heaters. I mean, I don't have one in this house, but I had one in another one. It was great. I don't know that you can do that with electric. Maybe, I'm not sure, but it's just there's a lot of things you kind of give up. But he shouldn't have said it might be banned someday. He should have said this is a discussion we need to have as a nation. That's what he should have said.
So I want to add that they don't even want that, because just to follow up on what I had said before about the energy sector, that if you give someone a platform that says the reason we don't want X is because 1 in 8 kids who are sick, it caused it. Now people are thinking about that. And the United States is the #1 exporter of liquefied natural gas right now, tied, I think, technically with Qatar, only because one of our 8 plants were down for a while during this year. But if we have a normal year in 2023, we will be the quote unquote Saudi Arabia of natural gas. Not only that, the last 2 years, the administration has approved another 16 more terminals. So we, what we're talking about, nearly 16 were approved in the last 2 years. A couple of those were before that in the prior administration. But the idea is that we are going to triple, in effect, our export capacity in terms of numbers. I think I looked at the actual math, and it might be a little bit less than that. But just raw numbers, we're talking about a full court press to supply the world with lots of more natural gas. And so if you sort of just undermine the credibility in any way, and people stop using it, then there's the expectation that people are going to choose not to use it, or just realize how it harms our green evolution.
Yeah, and that goes back to my point, though. When everybody stops laughing about the ridiculousness of the debate, then it boils down to an actual discussion. I think they made a mistake. They probably should have just let that guy say his piece to the reporter and let it die in the news. I think they would have been off. Now we've got a national discussion that they didn't want.
Exactly.
I think that was a mistake.
The Streisand effect.
Well, this brings us to our predictions. Dave, what do you have for us?
I think it's probably not a secret, but we talked about it, hinted at it right now, that there are multiple, and I think this was from Politico, if I remember correctly. There are multiple sources with knowledge of Biden's Biden's plans that he intends to, and I'm quoting here, I guess, I think it's Politico. He's intending to signal his intentions to seek a second term after the State of the Union address on February 7th, and then a more formal declaration will happen in the spring, so that that sort of clears the way for us to imagine that it's going to be a Biden-Trump rematch unless Trump gets pushed out of the ring. So you guessed it, 2024 is going to be fun, and we're going to know a lot more about it within a few months.
All right. Republican representative from Texas, Pat Fallon, has introduced impeachment articles against DHS Secretary Mayorkas on 3 points because he's, of course, in charge of the southern border. He terminated contracts for building the wall. Ended migrant protection protocols known as Remain in Mexico, and attempted to eliminate Title 42 authority to quickly expel people undocumented who cross illegally. It is Yeah, I will explain in a future show why none of those three should hold up legally. But my prediction is they're going to push an early vote on this because they want to get some type of impeachment going. The other committees, such as the weaponization of government, which the Democrats are calling, the tinfoil hat committee, and Jim Jordan, it's just going to be an S show that a lot of the Republicans in close elections aren't going to want any part of voting on impeachment in that one, but they want to get something going, so they're going to try to get this going. It probably will pass on a partisan vote, but then it'll go to the Senate for a trial. And it'll probably, they won't get 60 votes, obviously, and probably will fail on a mostly partisan vote. The question is, will they even get all the Republicans? Maybe they'll get two Democrats. I don't even think I have to bother to name the two, but that's about it. It's going to be an exercise in futility. I think we need to revisit this whole concept of impeachment. It doesn't work. The impeachment when Trump got 57 Republicans voting for his conviction, that was the most bipartisan impeachment result in history, and that's likely to be the most bipartisan ever. They should just scrap it and start over, come up with something new. Anyway, that's it for this week. We'll be back to talk about all of this and other issues next week. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.